Good Saturday afternoon to everybody. I hope you can hear me. I've got the fan on in the other room. We have what's called here in Southern California, we have what's called June gloom or May gray, where it's been really cold actually for the past at least month, where it's just overcast and cold and foggy and feels like wintertime. But the sun is out today and it's warm and everybody's out at the beach out there. Anyway, life is pretty damn good. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about Loki and Odin. I would have to say that Loki is easily the most misunderstood of all of the characters in Norse mythology. Odin is a close second. Because we have in the mythology, we have this revelation that comes about in the myth where Loki is eventually caught by the gods and by the celestial gods and tied to a rock under the earth by the guts of one of his sons, and he is sort of tortured in this cave, and he has a snake over him that's dripping venom onto him, and his poor wife is standing underneath with a bowl trying to catch the venom, and every time she goes to throw the venom aside, a couple of drops hit Loki and he writhes and it causes earthquakes. So we find out in that myth called the flighting of Loki that Loki and Odin are blood brothers. And so what the heck does that mean? And what we'll see. I've got kind of a headache today, so we'll see how well my brain is working. But I'm going to talk to you about the relationship between Odin and Loki and Brage, and perhaps we'll talk about Thor as well. But what I'm here to tell you is that if we really honestly take a look at the mythology, we're going to see why Odin and Loki are blood brothers. As I said earlier, Loki is easily the most misunderstood god in Norse mythology, and it is meant to be as such. How you respond to Loki will tell us how you feel about your own unconscious issues. It'll give us an awareness of your conscious awareness. It'll give us an awareness of how aware you are of your own emotional agendas. What is an emotional agenda? Maybe we should talk about that. When I use the word agenda, and if I get into a discussion or an argument with somebody, and I say to them that they clearly have an emotional agenda around whatever it is, people hear the word agenda and they oftentimes react as though I am accusing them of having some evil intent. Because when somebody has an agenda, like the globalist agenda, people don't. Everybody has an agenda all the time. All the time, everybody has an agenda. You meet a beautiful girl, you want to ask her out on a date. Your agenda is to get her phone number. You are a healer and you see somebody who needs healing. Your agenda is to heal them. It just means it's a goal that you have, an emotional agenda. If it's easier for you, why don't I call it an emotional attachment? But I like the word agenda better because that's really what happens when it's unconscious. When we become conscious of something, then we become aware that, wow, I'm really attached to the idea of whatever it is. But when it's unconscious, what ends up happening is that it has the force the drive of an agenda. Because here's the thing about unconscious agendas. They are deliberate. This is very important to understand. Just because you are unaware of it does not mean that it was not a deliberate choice. I hope I said that right. What I'm saying is that all of the things that you have in your unconscious mind, your unconscious fears, your unconscious beliefs, your patterns, your blocks, even though you're not aware of it on a conscious level, you deliberately chose them, you chose to adopt them at some point in your life, probably early on when you were a kid. But then what happens is they become unconscious, means we push them down because we become unaware of it. Guilt is a good example. For instance, whenever you feel guilty, what's really going on is that you're feeling angry, you're feeling rageful at somebody. So let's say you date a woman and you break her heart. You know, you cheat on her and you break her heart, and then you break up with her and you go on your way. And she keeps texting you or emailing you, and you feel guilty. That guilt is really rage. You are rageful at this person because they are reminding you of you being a bad person. So I'll give you another example of a deliberate but unconscious thing. There's a person I know who she's not involved. She doesn't watch this, so I'm not giving out her name. So I'm not telling any tales in school. But it's because we all have this. I have this and have experienced this as well. There's a person I know who is a very giving person. In fact, she completely identifies herself and presents herself as this giving, nurturing person. And she is. She's constantly giving to people. She's in the healing industry. She's an energy healer and a masseuse. And she's, anyway, I know that, trust me, it's none of you listening, so don't think I'm talking about you. But this is what she does for a living. So this is her. But one thing she never learned how to do is she never learned how to ask for anything for herself. And there's a good reason for this. When she was growing up, she had an older brother, and she came from a culture where eldest sons are promoted to the top of the food chain, and women and sisters are here to serve the men. And so she had this older brother who was constantly getting all the attention, and he would suck up all the air out of the room. And so the mother and the father were constantly doing things for the brother, and so she ended up, not getting her fair share of anything. This was her experience. This made her very sad and very angry. But she learned that in order to get love and acceptance, she had to constantly be giving. So this unconscious scenario happened to merge up with her actual essence, because her essence is that of a healer. However, what ends up happening is that every time she gives to somebody, on an unconscious level, what she really wants is somebody to give to her. So when she's feeling really needy, instead of saying, can you give me a hug, or can you help me, or can you, asking for something, reaching out and telling people, I'm sad, I'm lonely. Instead of having the ability to do that, what she does is she goes out and she starts giving things to people and starts to serve people. And then at some point, what will happen is she will have an explosion. And I've shared this with you. Her favorite phrase is, I don't ask for much. So she always says that when she's about to explode. I don't ask for much, and then she'll launch into a tirade about how nobody gives her, nobody cares about her, nobody blah, blah, blah. So what's happening is that on an unconscious level, when she is giving, she has an unconscious agenda to get. That is her agenda. Now, it's unconscious, meaning that in the moment, she's only aware that what she's doing is she wants to give to others. She's not aware consciously that what she's really doing is trying to get people to love her. She's not aware of that. Nevertheless, on an unconscious level, it is a deliberate attempt to manipulate people into giving something to her. So, this is what I mean. Just because it's unconscious does not mean it's not deliberate. And therefore, we are responsible for it. So you are responsible for all of your unconscious stuff. You are completely responsible for it. Now, you have to give yourself a break because you are human, and part of being human is that we have this thing called the unconscious mind. So I'm bringing all this up because in this myth called the flighting of Loki, let me see, the Lokasena, I think it's called. Hang on a second. I have it here. I have it here in my book called The Masks of Odin, by the way. It's got some pretty good stuff, as long as you don't read all of the editorial comments that the writer, the translator, puts in there, because she has no idea what she's talking about. But she does translate a lot of the words in a really good way, which is one of the reasons I use it. And it gives a lot of translations to some of the Norse words and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I use it. In any case, let's see here if I can find. Let's see if I can find it here. I was just looking at it. You'd think I could look into the table of contents and find it, but yeah, nope. Is that it? Where did we go? Come on, where are you? I'm 2 seconds away from looking it up. All right, I'm going to have to look it up in the table of contents. It is Lokasena, Loki's flighting. Flighting is a word that means to sort of taunt somebody with clever speech. And it's something that is part of especially the ancient Norse tradition, but probably the ancient Germanic tradition, which is why Brage is one of the gods, is that one of the things you would do is in the hall you would toast and you would, we call it roasting. You would roast somebody. You would make a joke about them. You'd say some clever twist on words about who they are and their name or something like that in order to tell a truth as well as to show somebody how much you care for them by giving them a nudge. So it's this is actually, Loki isn't just walking in and only just unleashing on people. He's also employing this ability to use speech in a way to reveal the truth about an individual. So I'm going to get into that. Anyway, I kind of confused myself here. So we were talking about the unconscious mind, and we were talking about, yeah, there it is. Okay, I'm going to have this ready because I think I want to talk about it at some point. I think I may quote from it. Because in this we find out that Loki and Odin are blood brothers, which again was the title of this. Loki and Odin are blood brothers. But what Loki does in this is he is in essence revealing the unconscious of all of the gods. And so if you don't understand Loki, then when you see him come into the hall of the Aesir, the celestial gods, and you see him begin to basically pull everybody's covers and reveal all the secrets of all of the gods, which, I'm not defending him. That's a pretty harsh thing to do. Then we either have to make, we kind of have two choices. Either Loki can't control himself. And the reason I thought of this is because there was somebody I got into a discussion with on the comment section of the video who was basically of the idea that Loki, he really didn't like Loki, he didn't trust Loki, he was afraid of Loki, and he was saying that Loki just can't control himself. He's just this force of destruction and chaos, and unless Thor comes in and stops him, he just will destroy everything. And that's only partially true. Loki is definitely the agent of destruction of this universe, without a doubt. But we have to ask ourselves, is Loki just out of control? Is he just a bad person? Is he a person of low moral character? Is he this cowardly, craven, untrustworthy person? Or does he know what he's doing? Is he the typical coyote, trickster, who is operating from crazy wisdom, meaning that he knows exactly what he's doing, that there is a healing intent behind it, but he's doing it in a way that looks crazy to the rest of the world, and he does that by design. You can tell by the way I'm describing it that I see him in the latter category. And as I've said before, I think in order to understand Loki, one has to be willing to take a look at their own unconscious agendas. Let me see if I can find it, because I can reveal in this interchange I had with this fellow his unconscious agenda, meaning he's not aware of it, but he has an unconscious agenda to find things that frighten him, and to set up the universe so that he can be kind of a victim. And I'm not, saying he's huge in that way, but he's still operating from that. So I won't name him. Let me see. Let me make sure I don't have my volume on there. All right. So he comes on. I won't read his entire thing, but he comes on and he says, by the way, this is the video, Loki God, Trickster, Devil, or Savior. Warning, he will deceive you. That's my clickbait title. Obviously, I'm trying to get people to look at it. And it's interesting, I put these clickbait titles, which are the exact opposite of what I want to say. And people only read the title, and then they comment on it. Just, at least watch, 30 seconds of the video or a minute of the video before it's just, really, people. All right, so he says, I think we should be more careful with Loki. And then he goes on to say things like, read the Lokasena, or the time he shaved Sif for no reason at all. That's not true. How do you know it was for no reason? Anyway, he goes on to say all these things about Loki, and I responded to him. And I explained to him, I said, I think you're projecting your understanding on him. And at one point, I'll try, I don't want to waste all your time with this, but I basically said that, I believe that he was being influenced by Christian morals. And let me be clear about that. If you live in Western society, if you were born in Europe or America, pretty much almost anywhere in the world nowadays, you have been programmed with Christian morals and Christian thinking. Christian thinking is very dualistic. Our ancestors didn't see this dualism. You only see dualism, which means two. It's either like God and the devil. The only time you see this is when you see a society that turns into an empire. And what is an empire? An empire is you have a king or an elite class, or both, that are ruling over large masses of people. And you have to control them. And the way you control them is you create an enemy. In Christianity, it was the devil. And everything was about fighting the devil. In the United States, it was communism. So these kinds of things. When you create this enemy, it creates a fear in people. And once somebody's in fear, you can control them. Very easy to control them once they're in fear. Point is that our society is built upon this dualist mindset. And whether or not you are religious or you were raised Christian or religious, It doesn't matter. You have been infused with this dualist thinking. And so people bring this into, when they pick up ancient mythology, they read that into it. And they can't help it. You know, when I first started teaching this, I had no idea there was such a thing as heathenism or Asatru or anything like that. I just simply had an experience with the gods of my ancestors, and I started teaching the mythology around it, and I found there's all these other people out there that, oh my God, there's a bunch of other people worshiping the Norse deities. And I reached out to them, and once they found out what I was all about, they sliced me to pieces. And I was very hurt by that and angered, and I remember asking somebody about it. And what they said is that it's kind of a dirty secret among heathens and Asatru that a lot of them are made up of born-again Christians, you know, the right-wing born-again Christians, but they want to be able to drink and smoke and have premarital sex, so they jump over and they become Asatru or heathen, and they just bring their whole right-wing dualist mentality over into that, and they paste it onto the gods. This is why there's so much hatred for Loki in fact, I wrote about this. And a friend of mine is an Asatru, and she said that in her kindred there was a rule that you couldn't speak Loki's name. And so they were out in a public park, this was in Idaho, and somebody said, oh, fuck it. And then they screamed out, Loki. And according to the story, out of the bushes came a skunk, which came in the middle of the circle and sprayed everybody and then ran back into the bushes. And then that was justification. They said, you see, Loki's evil. You should never speak his name. And I thought, well, it wasn't like a rattlesnake came out and bit a baby and killed it. It was a skunk. He just made you smell bad. There's nothing evil about that. He's just making fun of you. So it all depends on how you see, what you project. So that's what I'm saying, is that how you see Loki will tell me how unconscious you are of, you know, your own issues, your own unresolved issues. And it will show me that you probably have unconscious emotional agendas, which again, an agenda is a deliberate emotional choice. Right? So this guy's unconscious agenda here is that he is bent on finding an evil person, like a devil. And he's doing it with Loki. And so much so, he came onto my video and began wanting to talk about it and tell everybody, you have to be careful of Loki and blah, blah, blah. So let's see if I get what he said here. He said, yeah, because I said to him, where did I say that? I explained to him that if it weren't for Loki, Odin wouldn't have his horse, Thor wouldn't have his hammer, Frey wouldn't have his boar. All of the magical tools of the gods come from Loki. And then I say, because he asks, can you trust Loki? He's asking me earlier on, can you trust Loki? And I said, is he trustworthy? He's a trickster. So are you going to trust him like you would trust, you know, say Balder, you know, who's right there and open, and that's who he is? Loki is a trickster. So can you trust his intent? Yes, his intent is for your transformation. What is best for you. He's the bringer of the bitter medicine, the bitter truth. Does that mean that you want to walk up to him and put yourself in front of him, especially if you have unconscious emotional agendas? Hell no. No. You guys, listen, there's a lot of Loki in me. You see that when people ask questions, the first thing I do is I say, why are you asking that question? And you'll see lots of times I'll just open up people's unconscious stuff and throw it in their face. And the reason why I do that isn't because I'm trying to be an asshole. It's just because I only have 20 seconds or so to respond to somebody's question. And there's this huge, deep, unconscious issue that they need to become aware of. That's what's going to happen when you go in front of Loki. But he's going to be a little more devious about it, in that he is going to allow you to create a trap for yourself and then watch you step in it. Because he wants you to learn from your mistakes. That's what he's all about. He wants you to learn from your mistakes because it's the best teacher. Once you've stepped in a trap of your own making and you become aware that you did that, you'll never do it again. But that's the point. You have to become conscious. So being unconscious and having an unconscious agenda to find the devil in Loki means that you have an unconscious agenda to be a victim. And why is somebody a victim? A person becomes a victim and chooses on an unconscious level to become a victim because then you don't have to take any responsibility. Because once you're responsible, you have to be conscious. And consciousness is becoming conscious, becoming aware is a form of death. And here we get to the connection with Odin. Odin sacrificed himself to himself. He died to himself. He willingly died to himself, unlike Jesus, who supposedly unwillingly, he was forced to because he said, "Oh, Father, please take this cup away from me." And apparently God the Father said no. We don't know exactly, according to that mythology, what was said, but we just know that he came back and he said, "No, I got to do it." And he died for other people. And even still, God, what a whiner. This guy whined all the time. He's on the cross and he says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Big difference between that and Odin. Odin didn't whine to anybody. Odin made the choice deliberately to destroy his own limitations so he could become completely conscious. He died to himself, and as a result, he became master of the runes. The big difference there while we're on it. Anyway, I was going to try and use this guy as an example, but I'm not really finding that happening here. Here's what he says here. I said, can you trust Loki? He's a trickster, was my point. He took that and he said, that's my understanding of him. A trickster with his own motivations, who keeps his own counsel. That's his own projection. And that is his unconscious agenda. He needs to put that interpretation on the word trickster. That's not what trickster means. A trickster is not somebody who keeps his own counsel with his own motivations, meaning that he's just going to do whatever the hell he wants and screw everybody else. He's selfish. That's his own interpretation. And, as I'm talking with this guy, he just insists on that, dumping that interpretation on it. Point is that is an unconscious agenda. He has an unconscious, deliberate agenda to find the devil, to find the torturer, to find the abuser, to find the person. The deceiver is really what he's looking for, which is, again, a Christian idea. The Christian idea that there's this devil who is the father of lies, who is a deceiver, who only wants to destroy you, who, all of that. So, again, going back to Loki. By understanding your response to Loki, you will get a better idea of your unconscious agendas, because that's what Loki is here to do. He's here to reveal that to you. And if we have time later, I'll quote from the Lokasena, and that may spark some other discussion. Talking about Odin again, I'm going to try and wrap up my introduction here, and then we'll take some questions. So Odin is seen as Mercury, the deity, the planet Mercury. So as you know, I'm a Vedic astrologer, so I am always enjoying the associations between gods and planets and all that kind of stuff. So Odin is seen as Mercury, although I do not believe actually that Odin can be confined to Mercury. But what is Mercury? Mercury, the planet, represents our intellect. And as you know, if you've been following what I teach that you need to not be stuck in your intellect. In fact, people who are stuck in their intellect are avoiding their own frightening emotions and feelings. And obviously, what I teach is that people should be connected as best they can to their emotions and feelings. I'm wondering if I'm still online here. Anyway, I gotta go back some. So hang on for 1 second while I do that. Hopefully I won't lose you. All right, let's try and hopefully my live stream is still gone. Yep, there it is. Okay. So, bottom line here's what I'm trying to get at. I'm not being very smooth today. I got a headache. Odin is the flip side of Loki. So, as you know, astrologically speaking, Loki is not Mercury. Loki is Rahu, the north node of the moon. And Odin is seen as Mercury. But as I said, I do not believe that Odin is Mercury. I believe that if we were to assign Mercury to one of the gods, it would be Brage. Brage the poet. Brage is Mercury. Mercury is also communication, speech, and things like poetry and philosophy and that kind of stuff. And we're going to be talking about the connection between all of these. You know, we'll see. We'll get to it. I'll quote some stuff here. But we want to take a look at how Loki destroys the limitations of the intellect and how necessary that is to transformation. If Loki did not do his job, then the universe would stay static and it would not survive. And when we look at Odin, Odin does the same thing. Odin destroys boundaries. And this is why Odin is seen as a frightening god. That's why he's seen as the god of war. He's really not the god of war. His name, Woden, is often translated as rage. But it's not really rage, it's more like frenzy. But for those of us on the other side of it, when we experience Woden, we feel as though he is this rageful storm that is coming in and potentially destroying us. But what both Odin and Loki are doing is they are destroying the limitations of the intellect. And we'll talk about that. And I'm going to talk again about astrologically how that works. So, all right, I am babbling in circles, so I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break here, and then I'm going to come on and see if there are any questions. Again, if you're new to the channel, the best way to interact with me is to write in the live Q&A, question in all caps. Otherwise, I may miss it. And here's the, please avoid just writing your opinion and talking to each other on the Q&A. Reason for that is because I bypass all of that trying to find the questions, and lots of times I miss people's questions because of that. So please have respect for that. Yeah, just give me your question and we'll see where that goes. So give me a couple minutes here to get myself back together, and then I'll take a look at your questions. All right, so let's take a look at questions. Doesn't look like there's a lot here. So Bandawat33, it looks to me like you're new to the channel here. The best way to ask me a question is to put question in all caps so that I know you're asking me a question. But let's see here. You say, what about the Gnostics? What do you mean, what about them? You know, please, guys, if you're going to ask questions, please actually put time into writing a full sentence that has a clear, object, and be clear about what you're asking me. I don't know what you want me to do with that. What about the Gnostics? Or the true meaning behind the teachings of Christianity? There's a lot of assumptions there. But before I eviscerate you, let me just say that obviously you're new to the channel. If you want to know about Christianity, and if you want to know about the Gnostics, go on to my channel, and there's more than a few videos about Christianity, and I believe the latest Q&A that I did about Christianity, I actually talked about what the source of the Gnostic teachings were. Gnostics actually existed before Christianity, but there was a whole connection to that. Without getting into it, I'm not a fan of it. And I disagree with your assumption here. You have this assumption that there's a true meaning behind Christianity. And again, I don't know why you're bringing that up. This video has nothing to do with that. So anyway. But if you have a specific question and you write it intelligently, I'll do my best to answer it. Christianity was not corrupted. Yeah. Anyway, clearly you've got an attachment to Christianity. If you want to keep that attachment to Christianity, I do not recommend that you stay on my channel. Because if you look at objectively, how I reveal it, it's very likely it will destroy your understanding. It may even destroy your connection to it. As long as you're fearless about looking at your emotional attachments and your unconscious agendas with it. If you're willing to do that and you listen to what I say, I write about it in books, it'll destroy that. So if you really like the idea of Jesus, probably you should stop watching my channel. All right. Yeah, Bandawat33, clearly, never have I said Loki is real, neither is Odin. This is the difference between, I'll talk about this very briefly because we got other things to talk about. The difference between the Abrahamic religions and every other religion in the history of humankind is that every other religion is always mythological. And to understand the mythological mindset, you have to go to the only people alive today who still have an unbroken connection to their Indo-European polytheist tradition are the Hindus. And if you ask a Hindu, if you say to him, like I've got Ganesha. Ganesha is on my shirt here. So if you ask them about Ganesha and you say, is Ganesha real? They will say, oh yes, Ganesha is very real. He's a very real god. And if you ask him in the same breath, is Ganesha a symbol? They will say, oh yes, Ganesha is a symbol. If you ask them, are there many gods? They will say, oh yes, there are many gods. If you ask them, is there only one God? Oh yes, there is only one God. Are the gods real, or are they just emanations of the one God? Yes, they are real, and yes, they are emanations of the one God. You can't pin them down into a black and white answer. This is how our ancestors viewed the gods. So for you to come on here and say Loki's not real, neither is Odin, that's the obvious truth. Now, your unconscious agenda here is that Jesus was real, or you want to link Jesus with them and say Jesus was mythological. But as I was going to say, the difference between every other religion in existence and the Abrahamic religions is that the Abrahamic religions were created as literal. Now, you can try to impose a mythological, symbolic meaning behind it. It won't work. It wasn't meant to be that way. And I'll give you an example. The Gospels talk about a man whose name is Jesus of Nazareth. Nazareth is a literal place that existed. And so they give the history of Jesus as a literal history. And this is where Christianity paints itself into a corner and causes all the problems. Because whenever you want to give a literal history and say this is literal truth, all you have to do is find one thing that's wrong with it, and then it destroys the whole thing. In that sense, I am in complete agreement with the fundamentalists who say either you take the whole Bible or none of it. And that's not how I treat other scriptures or other teachings. I treat the Bible that way because that's the way it was meant to be interpreted. And if you want to interpret it a different way, then you're going to run into all kinds of problems because it's just not meant to be that way. So again, I don't know what your agenda is. I don't know if your agenda is to say that Jesus is mythological, or that you want to say Jesus was a real person and Odin is a myth. I don't really care what it is. Whichever one, I think you have a misunderstanding of both of those things. Okay, Susie Jotun's wife. Question: are there any nakshatras you associate with Loki or Odin? Yes. I don't know them off the top of my head, but any nakshatra that is ruled by Rahu is going to have a connection to Loki. And any nakshatra that's ruled by Mercury is going to have a connection to Odin. That's K2. Never mind. I was going to say something. Anyway, Didge Village. All right. So he makes a statement and then asks a question. So let's see how I usually don't like that, but let's see what happens here. In many mythologies, you mean mythologies? Okay. It says methodologies. In many mythologies, two brothers fight for supremacy. Question: is the Nordic myth following this pattern? No. So you're not listening to what I'm saying, Band of What 33. I want you to write the word question in all caps so that I know it's a question. I'm not saying for you to write everything in all caps. That I'm going to go past that. I see the question mark. The whole idea of writing question in all caps is so that I know you're asking me a question. Okay? You ask, do you know anything about Iberian paganism? I don't know what you mean by what part of Iberian paganism. Celtic Iberian? There's all kinds of Iberian. Short answer is no. I don't. JNG questions. Are there tricksters besides Loki in Norse myths? Are all tricksters? Yeah, Odin is a trickster. Odin disguises himself and goes around in disguises, and that makes him a trickster as well. This is one of the things that gives similarities between Odin and Loki, is that they're both shapeshifters. And they both like to wear disguises. Are all tricksters share the same intent to help people work out their problems? Yes. In ancient mythology, there are things like evil spirits. There are things like evil entities. You have trolls. Trolls are always negative. They're a form of a giant. You have the giants, the Jotuns. Some of the giants are beneficial. Many of them are just neutral, like forces of nature. And some of them are outright destructive towards human beings. They have destructive intent towards human beings. I myself was an exorcist many years ago. And I've seen all kinds of crazy things, and I can tell you that demons do exist. Now, what they really are, that's a whole other discussion. If you're interested, go watch my videos about demons and exorcisms. So don't confuse tricksters with negative entities like trolls and those kinds of things, mischievous spirits. Tricksters are deities who have a purpose and a function which is to transform you out of your limitation. And as I said before, one of the things that they do is they will tempt you. Now, they don't lie to you. They won't come right out and lie. They don't do that. They will always tell the truth. But what happens is they will push your buttons so that your unconscious agenda, the ways that you lie to yourself, will be stimulated, and then will tempt you to say, yeah, go ahead and create that for yourself. And then you'll step into your own trap of your own making. Tricksters, however, what they really are hoping for, when they connect with you, what they're hoping for is that you have the conscious awareness to see your self-delusion, the lies that you say to yourself. They want to see you become aware of that and point it out and go, oh my God, I just almost lied to myself and got myself into trouble. When they see you do that, they take off their mask and they say, good, now let me show you a secret. And they will reveal to you the secrets of the universe. When you have a trickster as your best friend, which the only way for that to happen is you have to be conscious. You have to be ruthlessly conscious with yourself. You have to be fearless, which is why the first thing I say if you want to follow my path is you got to get rid of all victim mentality. If you have even the slightest bit of victim mentality where you want to see somebody who's going to do it to you and you'll be a helpless victim, then you won't make any progress on my path. That's the first thing you have to do. When you do that, then tricksters become your greatest teachers, and they'll say, come here, I'm going to show you what's behind the curtain. I'm going to show you what's really going on. They'll also do things like, here, watch that guy. You'll see somebody, and they'll show you somebody who does something self-destructive, and they'll say, did you see why he did that? Don't be that guy. Your greatest teachers are the people who, name it. Name whoever it is in your life that you don't like. Name somebody in your life that is harmful to you or, is unhappy. That is your best teacher. Because all you have to do is just sit back and watch them. Watch them lie to themselves, deny things, act out of fear. And just do whatever it is that they don't do. Do the opposite of them. I have one in my life. My greatest teacher in the world. Anyway, I talked about him before. Susie Yoten's wife, question. Do you think the Snapton stone is a depiction of Loki? I don't know. I'd have to see it. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, so I'll look that up at some point. Okay, so now we're going to go a little deeper into Loki and Odin. And I'm going to be reading from the Lokasena. It's a long myth. I'll try and avoid reading the whole thing because I tend to really go off. But first, let's talk about how Loki gets here, okay? So I'll read the introduction here. It says, Augur, also named Geimer, had prepared a drinking bout for the Aesir after receiving the great cauldron, as has been told. I won't get into that. To this banquet came Odin and Frigg, his wife. Thor did not, as he was easterly ways, meaning he was in the east, fighting the trolls and the giants. But Sif, his wife, was there. Also Brage and his wife Idun. Tyr also, he was one-handed, for the Fenris wolf had torn off his hand while being bound. There was Njord and his wife Skade. Skade means shadow. Frey and Freyja and Vidar, Odin's son. Loki was there, and also Frey's servants, Bygvr and Bela. There was a host of Aesir and elves, so the ancestors, the ascended masters, were also there. Interesting, they don't say a word in here. Nobody talks to them. Everybody leaves them alone, and Loki doesn't go after them. Very interesting. Well, that's something to talk about. But we won't do that right now. Agur had two servants, Fimafeng and Elder. So Fimafeng means deft, meaning that he was good at what he did. Let's see here. Bright gold supplied the light instead of fire. So everything was made of gold, and the light that was shining from the gold gave the light in the hall, as opposed to the flames, like the candles or whatever. Just gold. So the gold shining in the hall is what lit the place up. That's important. The ale served itself, and the place was inviolable and spacious. Those present praised the excellence of Aegir's servants. Loki could not bear this. Now, if you're looking at this, just sit with that for a second. Let me create everything here. All of the gods and the elves have come together in this hall. I'm assuming this is in Asgard somewhere. In this hall that is filled with the brightness of gold. The ale is serving itself, just this endless fountain of ale and mead that people can go and drink. And the servants are making sure that everybody has everything that they need. And the gods are there. And it says here that Gymer had prepared a drinking bout. So this means the gods had shown up for the intended purpose to tie one on. They were going to get drunk. That's why they were there. That's not when I read it, that's not what comes up for me until I read the words, Gymer had prepared a drinking bout for the Aesir. Okay, so the Aesir were there to tie one on. They were there to get shit-faced. And all of this is going on, and all the gods show up, and the elves are there as well. And all of the people there start praising the excellence of the servants that are running around, making sure that the gods have whatever their whims are, making sure that their ale horn is filled to the brim all the time. They have food, they have everything that they need. They want for nothing. It says here, Loki could not bear this. And then he killed Fimifang. Whereupon the Aesir shook their shields, shouted at Loki, and drove him into the forest while they went to drink. So that's the setup. Loki shows up, and so now, just be there for a second and just kind of sit with yourself and ask yourself how you respond to this. Do you think that Loki is just being a troublemaker? That the gods, the holy high ones, should be allowed to party it up and have a good time and hang out with each other and drink and have fun? Why did Loki do this? So your response to that is going to reveal your projection. Now, this myth is setting you up. So let me just be clear about that. This myth is setting you up so that you will have a negative reaction to Loki. And unless you put the time and effort to be ruthless with your own unconscious agendas, emotional attachments, your projections, unless you have an awareness of that, your first reaction is going to be that you are going to hate Loki. Because we want to identify with the gods. We don't want to identify with somebody who's causing people a problem. So we have to ask ourselves, why did he hate this so much? Why did this infuriate Loki? It doesn't say. Now, we could make the judgment that Loki was jealous, that Loki felt left out, that Loki can't handle love in his heart. Let me give you an example of something like this. One of the things that drives me crazy is when I hear people making blanket statements about somebody from Islamic countries. This was years ago, but there were some refugees from, I can't remember where in Africa. Some refugees from Africa, and there was a city that they lived in. This was years ago. It's not now. This was years ago. And the U.S. government had allowed them to come and put them in some city somewhere. And there was a guy there who wouldn't rent to them. Like, he owned a building. He owned an apartment building, and he wouldn't rent to people from this African country. I forget what the country was. And when he was asked about it, he says, I don't want to rent to people who hate freedom. That was his response. And his only understanding of that was that these people were from Africa, and I guess he assumed that they were Muslim. And so for that reason only, he chose not to rent to them, because in his mind, those people hate freedom. That is an unconscious agenda right there. And the reason why it bothers me when people talk like that is because this is somebody, if I were to sit them down and I were to ask them, and I would say, okay, can you tell me what part of Africa these people are from? Can you tell me what sect of Islam they practice? Can you tell me the difference between what these people practice and what people practice in Saudi Arabia and what people practice in Iran? Can you tell me the difference between all of those factions? And can you tell me how many Muslims stood up against 9/11 and all the stuff that happened? There's no doubt in my mind that that person would have zero ability to do that, because to him, it's all the same thing. Why is that? Because that person has an emotional agenda, an unconscious emotional agenda. He's looking for the devil, and he's found it. As long as it has the word Muslim in it, or Africa, or immigrant, that is a bad person, and that person is evil, and that person hates freedom. So this is what this myth is trying to do. In the beginning, this myth is trying to stimulate you so that you will project that onto Loki. Because it sounds really good, doesn't it, to go into this bright, shining hall? The gold is shining, and the ale serves itself, and the servants are running around, and they're making sure you have everything that you need, and the gods are there, and they're laughing, and they're having a good... They're the gods, after all. And they're laughing, and they're having a good time, and you are supposed to want to be a part of that. That's why it's set up this way. And then in comes Loki. He sees this. This incenses him so much that he kills the servant. So now watch again what the gods do here. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss this. The gods say, the myth here says that Loki could not bear this. He slew Fimafeng, the servant, whereupon the Aesir shook their shields, shouted at Loki, and drove him into the forest while they went back to drink. They didn't give a shit about that servant being dead. If they did, what would have happened is they would have chased Loki out. Maybe they would have captured him and bound him up right then and there. Then they would have stopped everything, and they would have done some kind of sacred ceremony for the death of that good servant, because they praised Aegir for his servant. He was this and Fimafeng means that he's very good at his job. I forget the exact translation, but it means that he did his job perfectly, or could do everything magically all at once. And instead of having this funeral ceremony for this poor servant who's just doing his job and doing it well, instead of that, once they chase Loki off, what do? They go back to drinking. Because the ale is serving itself. So, they didn't really need that guy anyway. Now, why is it that when you read that, your first response isn't what the fuck are the gods doing? Why are they so insensitive and so narcissistically wrapped up in themselves that they don't see that there's a dead guy who got killed for just doing his job? And why aren't they so incensed that they're chasing Loki down and tying him up and putting him in prison? They just got him out of there so that they could go back to drinking. Did you see that when you read the myth? If you did not see that, it means that you had an unconscious agenda to emotionally project yourself into the gods. If when you read that Loki couldn't bear this and he killed the servant, and your first thought was of anger toward Loki. That's revealing your unconscious projection about him. Because you're not asking, why did he do that? Now, if you come into the myth like I did, with an agenda, and again, everybody has an agenda, there's nothing wrong with it. My emotional agenda connected to Loki is, I want to see how Loki is being the crazy wisdom teacher who's going to show me myself in ways that I'm not aware of, and bring to my awareness my unconscious issues. So because I have that, I caught that first time I read it. I went, now I'm going to watch what Loki does. So, Loki's off in the forest. The gods go back and start drinking themselves silly. Totally unaware, in a very narcissistic, very insensitive, very insensitive. I'm sorry, but that is very insensitive. Somebody just died, and you haven't even bothered to do anything about that, or to even raise the toast to the guy. All you did was chase out the guy who caused a little bit of mischief for you. I mean, he didn't just, he killed somebody, but for you, it was, you saw it as just mischief, and you drove him away. So then Loki returns and he talks to, I guess these people are guarding outside, right? Elder, the other guy, he's outside. He's a servant. He's not part of the, he's outside waiting to serve people, and he's sitting outside. And Loki comes back and he says, tell me, Elder, before you take another step, at the ale feast, whereof, he asks, whereof speak the sons of the triumphant gods? Meaning, what are they talking about? He's asking him, what are the gods talking about? Before you go back in there, what are the gods talking about? Elder says, they judge of their weapons and their battle honor, the sons of the triumphant gods, of Aesir and elves, in their none has a good word for you. So they're talking about their weapons, they're talking about how strong they are, how good they are, and then they're bad-mouthing Loki. Again, the guy's dead, and they're spending time bad-mouthing Loki. All right, now again, what is your emotional agenda here? Do you think that Loki's response is going to be one of spite? Is it going to be that they're saying mean things about him, so because he's bitter and he's selfish and he's lonely, he's going to take that personally? Is that your response? Because that's how you're supposed to feel. This myth is setting you up so that you'll feel that way. Tell me, Elder, before you take another step at the ale feast, whereof speak the sons of the triumphant gods? Elder, they judge of their weapons and their battle honor, the sons of the triumphant gods. Of Aesir and elves, in their none has a good word for you. Loki, I shall go into Aegir's hall and see this drinking feast. He says, I want to go in and watch them drink themselves silly. I want to watch them get themselves shit-faced. I shall bring scorn and anger to the Aesir's son, and so blend evil in the mead. Now, you may again, if your response is that Loki is just being a troublemaker, these are the gods, they have the right to go in there and drink themselves silly if that's what they want to do. If that is your response, then you're forgetting the Havamal. I don't know exactly how many verses there are in the Havamal that talk about the evils of drunkenness. But there's more than a few. And it's Odin. Odin himself is the one that says, listen, if you're going to drink, just have a few sips or have one cup and leave it at that. Because otherwise, and he goes into all of the evils of drinking and drunkenness. And Loki is the one here who's saying that he's going to go in and watch them get themselves shit-faced. And that he is going to scorn them for doing so. Okay, so he says, I shall bring scorn and anger in the Aesir's, to the Aesir's sons, and so blend evil in the mead. Elder says, Know that if you go into Aegir's hall to see this drinking feast and heap scorn and abuse on the gentle gods, they may wipe it off on you. If you go in there and cause problems, they're going to kick your ass. Loki. And you know, elder, if we two have it out with words together, that I am far better armed with speech than you. In other words, elders, says if you go in there and you try and talk crap to the gods, they're going to kick your ass. They're going to he says they're going to out-talk you. In which case, Loki says, you know what, if you really want to talk with me about this, I'll wipe the floor with you. I am far better at this than you are. I have to admit, this is me talking, I'm like this myself. It's like I'm the last person you want to get in an argument with, especially if you don't know what you're talking about. I'm gonna eviscerate you and slice you to pieces. And so this Loki's, I'm not proud of that, but that's what Loki says. He says, you really want to have this discussion with me? Because I'll wipe the floor with you. Then entered Loki into the hall. Then entered Loki into the hall. At his entrance, all fell silent. All drinking and noise and crazy. Just that silence. That would be very funny if this was a movie. It would be a very funny moment. Now imagine Loki's walking in. You can hear his boots hitting the wood on the floor of the hall as he's walking in there. Silent. You just hear this clip, clop, as he's walking in, and all of the gods are silent, staring at him. This is how I would direct the movie. Give him, a few seconds to do that. And then he says, Thirsty came lopped into this hall from far away to beg the Aesir that one of them might give me a sip of fine mead. Silence. Why are you silent, gloomy gods? Have you nothing to say? Either show me a seat or forcibly drive me away. Now, for any of you who think that Loki is a coward, ask yourself, is that the actions of a coward? I would say that's not the actions of a coward. So again, we have to ask ourselves, is Loki choosing to do this? Or is he just incapable of controlling himself? And he's just out of his mind with resentment and anger, and he's just spite, and he's just going to come in and he just can't keep his mouth shut. How do you see him walking in? This is your emotional agenda. How you see Loki, I'm going to reveal to you what's important about this. How you see Loki is how you see yourself. If you think Loki is evil and selfish and weak and all of that, that's how you see yourself. On an unconscious level. Consciously, you may think you're the king of the world. On an unconscious level, you hate yourself. Your feelings towards Loki will tell you how you feel about yourself. Sorry, but that's just the way that it is. Let me see, before I go any further, because I could talk about this all night. Either show me a seat or forcibly drive me away. Brage, who I believe is the real embodiment of Mercury, which is the intellect. The intellect is what we use to speak, to communicate words. It is the intellect that thinks it knows everything. The word intellect means to pick apart from among. It says that's over there and this is over here and this is this and that is that. Let me expound to you what this means. I'm doing a lot of Brage right now. I'm using my intellect to parse all this stuff. The intellect thinks it knows everything. Brage says, a seat at the festive board shall you never have from the Aesir, because they well know what kind of person they choose to carouse with. So if you're, I might have to change what I'm about to say. I might be wrong here, but I am willing to bet that Brage has the most extreme view of Loki. And my belief on that is because Loki's job is to destroy the limitations of the intellect. And what does the intellect do? The intellect wants to preserve itself. This is why, you know, people who want to argue their unconscious agendas are usually trap themselves in intellectual arguments, because it's the intellect that we use to hide from our own unconscious agenda. So it is no coincidence that the first person to speak up is Brage, the intellect, because he does not want Loki there. Now, I'm going to now link this with astrology. Do you remember this? This is called the direction wheel, and it shows how the planets balance each other out. And when you have a planet that is, going too far in one direction, you use another planet to balance it out. So here it is. Okay, so it may be kind of hard to see, but you have to look in the southwest. In the southwest, you see two symbols. You have one on top of another. The outside is like being on top, and on the inside is sort of being beneath it. So the one on the outside is the one that has the power to dominate or control or balance the other planet. So if we look in the southwest, and in this case the east is in, for you, the east is over here. It's going east and west like this, right? So the southwest, the bottom corner down here. You want to look in the southwest there and take a look at the symbols for those two planets. If you don't know what those symbols are, I'll tell you. The symbol on the outside is Rahu, which is the north node of the moon, which is, if we were to connect a planet to Loki, it would be Rahu. The planet beneath that is Mercury. What that means is that when Mercury is out of balance, you use Rahu to counteract the limitations of Mercury, which means when you are trapped in your intellect, and remember, when the intellect is out of control, it's not just doing its job. The job of the intellect is to say, that's up, that's down, that's hot, that's cold, I'm me, you're you. That's, I drive on the right side of the road, the light is green, I can turn, oh no, it's a left turn signal. That's what the intellect is there to do. It's there to parse out the definitions of things. And we do that so we can function in this three-dimensional reality. But that's all it's good for. We use it to communicate. We have these words. You see these words up here. Because you know how to read, there's a word astrology, thunder, wizard. You know what those words mean. Your intellect is what's reading those words and telling you what they mean. That's what the intellect is for. When the intellect goes beyond that and it starts to make proclamations about the universe, it will do so in very blanket terms. Like, every Muslim from Africa hates freedom. That's the intellect out of whack. I made I don't believe that. I'm quoting the guy that I was talking to you about earlier, who has no clue what he's talking about. He doesn't know all the differences between Muslims. He doesn't even know all of the countries. If I were to show him a map and say, show me where all the Muslims are, he wouldn't even be able to tell you what countries they live in. All he knows is that he watches the cable news, and cable news has told him that immigrants who are Muslims hate freedom. That's all he knows. And that's his intellect. Right? So when the intellect is out of whack, you don't use the mind, because as you know, what I say is there's a difference between the intellect and the mind. The mind is the part of you that reflects the light of the spirit, meditation. When you're connected to your mind, you see things broadly, and you're able to see things expansively. You're able to connect and empathize with other people. You're able to see where people are coming from, and understand them, and give them compassion, and give them healing. Whereas if you're in the intellect, what you're going to do is you're going to slice people apart, you're going to criticize them, and you're going to find how they're different than you. See, I'm pointing fingers at myself here because I've got a pretty damn good intellect. I can do that pretty damn well. So what you use to overcome that is Rahu. This is why when Loki comes in here, the first person that talks to him is Brage, because Brage is a high form of the intellect. Okay? So we'll go a little bit farther. We'll go through Loki and Brage's exchange here. Brage says, "A seat at the festive board shall you never have from the Aesir, because they well know what kind of person they choose to carouse with," meaning you are inferior to us. Loki says, he does, this is great. Loki doesn't even acknowledge him. He goes straight to Odin, and he says, "Remember, Odin, how in the foretime we two mingled blood together? You then said you never would drink ale were it not served to us both." Now, this may be my projection, but if I were directing this film, I would have Loki at that point having an emotional moment and feeling sad and feeling hurt and saying, you were my blood brother and you didn't even invite me to this. Giving, and all the while he's not even listening to Brage. He's not even listening to that simple-minded intellect guy. He's not even bothering. Because again, the intellect is something we use to avoid our emotions. So for people who spend all this time, and I like to point it out, whenever I say to somebody and I start, if somebody comes on here and they write a question, I go, "Ooh, look at the intellectual question there." I'm not giving them a compliment. I'm saying that they're using their intellect to avoid their feelings, and then it's coming. I'm about to slice them apart and show. I'm gonna be Loki on them. So I believe that's part of my job. So that's why I say, if you follow me, be careful what you ask. Think your questions out before you ask them. See if you can connect to your emotions and see if you know what it is you really want to know. Because if you try and bullshit me, or if you unconsciously, because you're doing it to yourself and you haven't, nobody's put that mirror up to you, and you walk into my Q&A and you throw out some intellectual whatever, I'm going to slice you apart. That's my job. So that's why I say, my job isn't just to slice you apart to make you look bad. My job is to help you understand, number one, how to connect emotionally, and then number two, learn how to ask a question. If you can ask a question of me, most of the time, I'm human, but if I'm in my teacher space and you can ask me a question that I respond to, it means that I'm saying that you are learning how to ask the universe. And once you learn how to ask questions of the universe, you won't need me or any other teacher. You can have a direct connection to the universe and have the universe teach you directly. But in order to do that, you have to learn how to ask a real question. And that sometimes takes some time. "Remember, Odin, how in the foretime we two mingled blood together. You then said you never would drink ale were it not served to us both." And I would imagine there's tears in his eyes as he's saying. Odin, being who he was, says, "Rise, Vidar, and let the wolf's father have a seat in the assembly, that Loki may not charge us with scorn here in Aegir's hall." That to me is a noble response. He's by his actions he is saying you're right. I acknowledge that. Because he's Odin after all. And this is Loki. If you think that Odin is doing this, Odin is Woden. He is the master of Wod. He's constantly in frenzy of his own awareness. He doesn't have any space in him to put up with any crap from anybody. He not only puts up with it, he says to Vidar, who has obviously a place of honor, he says, "Rise and let Loki sit there." Vidar rose and poured for Loki. Before he drank, Loki addressed the Aesir. Okay, so then this starts a whole other thing, which I'm not going to get into right now. But what I want to take you back to is, again, take a look at this here, and then we'll take a look at some other planetary connections. Now, did you catch it? Take a look at what's going on in the north. In the north, you have Mercury on the outside and the moon on the inside. This means that when the mind, remember the difference between the intellect is the intellect wants to limit things, wants to judge things. And this is a very important, you can't drive down the street without making judgments about what to do, when, and to follow the rules. It's an arbitrary, by the way, in the US we drive on the right side of the road. And it's an arbitrary line. I mean, it's a painted line down the road. There's nothing, on most streets, there's nothing preventing you from just going over to the left side of the road, except for your intellect that tells you you have to drive on the right side of the road. So you have to have it. What does the moon do? The moon, when it's in its state, goes, I wonder what that guy on the other side of the road is thinking. Wow, he must be going there. Wow, you know what? I'm not the only being in the universe. And when I did this, it must have had that effect on that person. The moon treats things with compassion. It doesn't look to separate. It looks to connect. It's looking for the ways that things connect and work together because it's expansive. So the intellect contracts and the mind expands. So when the mind starts expanding too much and you're unable to focus, like if you get deep into meditation, this happens to me, and then sometimes, you can't focus. Like when I play the sacred African drums, I go into trance and the orishas come down and all kinds of crazy stuff happens and I go into a whole other place. I mean, I got a video somewhere of me playing. You can see me sort of, going out of my body like that. When I do that, I can't function afterwards because I'm deep in the mind, the moon. I'm deep in the moon at that point, which is, by the way, the ancestors, the direction of the elves, the ascended masters. So when the moon is doing its thing, the intellect has to say, hey, wake up, come on, we've got to be here at 4:30, and you got to get in your car, and it starts bringing you back into time and space, and this and that, and here and there, and all of that. So the intellect has some function, right? Anyway, I kind of wanted to bring that in. So again, I wanted to say that I don't believe that Odin is completely Mercury, even though he does represent Mercury. And if I choose to worship a Mercury god, I'm going to worship Odin, not Brage. Nothing against Brage. I'm going to worship Odin. Because Odin has expanded, he blew apart the intellect. Odin, in my estimation, represents the union of the mind and the intellect. You bring the two of those together, you have Odin. Odin brings them together, Loki smashes them apart. Rahu is a very expansive planet. In fact, he blows things up. That's what he does. He expands things beyond their normal boundaries. So when the intellect is contracting too much, you don't use the moon to counteract it. You would think, you use the moon to counteract the intellect. You use Rahu. You use Loki to blast it apart. And then Jupiter, which is Thor, later on Thor comes in, and Thor is the only one that can keep Loki in his place. Thor, and Loki himself says, among all of the gods, I'm going to listen to Thor because he will actually do something about it. He says it. And guess what? Let's look here. Up in the northeast, Jupiter is on the outside, Rahu's underneath it, which means Jupiter is used to counteract the effects of Rahu when Rahu is out of balance. It's all here. It's all here. If you don't think this is a spiritual science, meaning something that can be verified in practical reality in your life, then how could they know that? They don't know Vedic astrology. That was written, we assume that was written, we know that was written down about 1,000 years ago, but it represents an ancient mythological tradition that goes back thousands and thousands of years. Those Germanic tribal people did not go to India and study Vedic astrology and then create a myth about it. I think that's pretty cool. All right, so I'm going to take a break here again, and then I'll come back and see if there are any questions. Okay. Turn that off. Boy, we really got the ball rolling. There's all kinds of fur flying. I pushed people's political and racial buttons, and they're fighting with each other here. Let's see here. All right, so I'm going to try and find the questions. Again, the less that you can talk, fighting with each other, talking to each other, dumping your opinion, all of that takes time away from me answering people's honest questions. So, it's good for me. I know that's a Q&A, but I'd prefer that you just simply ask me questions. It's better for everybody's time. JNG, question. How do I need to prepare myself to face and talk to Loki in Journey? Do I need to go alone, or can I take support of my friends' spirits? Well, generally speaking, my experience with Loki is if you want to connect with Loki, just go and be yourself. And don't come, with any pretense. So, having said that, a person's consciousness is going to have a huge effect on how Loki responds to you. I would also say that I would want to see your chart. Like, I would want to see your astrology chart to see where Rahu is placed. And, whether Rahu is helping you or causing you problems. Having said that, if, Loki is almost a force of nature because he is technically a giant. And giants are forces of nature, like gravity and time. Loki, in my estimation, is the force of transformation. So when you go, when you go into, step into a hot lava pit, it's going to be really hot. And so, you got to be prepared for that. If you're going to walk into Loki's presence, I mean, I don't know why you would choose to do it, but if you chose to do it, then be prepared that, Loki's going to do the unexpected, and he's probably going to do something that's going to be challenging for you. And if you do want to talk to him, then just be honest and real, and be willing to just tell him all of your faults, because he sees them anyway. He can smell them. My personal experience with Loki is that when I tried to worship him, he made it clear. He said, "Don't do that. Just be my friend. Just talk to me like you would talk to a friend, and just be real with me." So that's my suggestion to others. But I think I may have a specific connection with him based on my karma and my chart and other kinds of things like that. So my initial thing is, unless you really have a need or a desire, just leave him alone and let him do his thing. Sometimes you don't need to, open that box. Sometimes you just let things alone. Having said that, it will always benefit you. It just might be challenging. That's my own personal experience. So Band of What 33 starts to show his true colors and starts saying his intellect is showing. He's making blanket statements. And then Cosmo Joe got in there and you guys started fighting, it looks like. Iowa X question. And I guess I'm saying that because, it just don't, sometimes we get new people on here and they dump crap on here. Just avoid them. If they're a problem, I'll get rid of them. Just so that I can get to the questions. Having said that, I mean, it's easier said than done. I mean, I tend to react to people when they attack me. So, anyway. Iowa X question. What was the hypocrisy that angered Loki? I thought I made that pretty clear. There's another myth that shows Loki's personality, which is when Balder is shot with the arrow by his brother, blindness or ignorance. And Loki puts the mistletoe on the end of the arrow, which is the only thing that can hurt him. And he did that for one reason. When Balder was there, and the gods, again, were drinking, the gods were getting shit-faced, and they were drinking. And what happens when people drink, by the way, this is just what happens energetically. When people drink, they get narcissistic. They get wrapped up in themselves, and they don't give a shit about anybody else. That's why they start talking really loud. That's why they get in your face, and because they have no boundaries anymore. So the gods were drinking again, and they were using Balder as a party favor. They were throwing knives at him. They were throwing spears at him. They were shooting arrows at him. They were throwing axes at him. They were and of course, they were laughing because everything was either bouncing off of him or exploding. They're having, they weren't appreciating him because Balder is the soul, and they weren't appreciating the infinity of the soul, and that's what that represents. Loki appreciated Balder for who he was and didn't take him for granted. And when he saw the gods were doing that, he became incensed, and that's why he concocted that whole thing so that ignorance would kill him. Why? So that the gods would then mourn for his loss, and they would not take the soul for granted. It also represents the soul going under the earth, meaning under flesh. When we become incarnated, it's Balder incarnating under flesh. and we forget who we are. That's what that represents. If you remember, at the end of that myth, Frigga goes to everybody, and in order to get Balder out of hell, Hela tells her that she has to get everybody to cry for him. So she gets every being in the universe to cry for Balder, and then finds a giantess who is said might be Loki, and the name of this giantess is Gratitude. And when Gratitude is asked to weep for Balder, Gratitude says, "No, I am not going to weep for him, because every moment I was with him, I completely appreciated him. To weep for him would be to show that I didn't acknowledge and appreciate what I had while he was here. So no, I'm not going to cry for him." That is what Loki was all about in that myth. And again, if you don't pull back and allow yourself to see yourself in there ruthlessly, you're not going to see what Loki is trying to teach. And Loki's never going to come out and do that. One of the things the guy said earlier is, when I was saying, what Loki was, he said, well, maybe that's true. Maybe there's some lost fragment to the myth where, it writes out exactly what Loki's intentions are. And I said, the myth, there's no such thing. Myths don't work like that. This isn't grade school. This isn't nursery school. You are supposed to be subtle. You're supposed to be willing to ponder these things. These are multi-dimensional spiritual teachings. There's some people that they've taken the myths, I don't know what it's called now, I forgot, but they turned it into some book, and they tried to turn it into the Bible. Like they took all the myths and turned it into like a pagan Bible or a heathen Bible. I forget what they called it. But it's like complete lack of understanding of how this stuff works. Christianity spells everything out for you. Jesus is the Son of God, and you will go to hell if you don't believe in Jesus. And it's just all out there in grade schools. There's no subtlety to any of it. There's no symbolism. That's not how the myths work. You got to be willing to take a look at yourself. All right, so I'm not going to get into the nonsense here that Bandawat is saying. Like I said, I think he's kind of new to the channel. Knut Karstensen, 50 something. I don't know. I don't think that's dollars, but thank you, sir. I appreciate that for supporting the channel. Question: I thought Skadi meant to harm, to injure. Is the shadow interpretation always applicable? Skade is still the word for harm, injury in Norway. Well, my understanding is that Skade is the Old Norse for the English shade. Because what we do in English is we take those K sounds oftentimes and they become an SH. So for instance, like the words, we have two words in English for pieces of clothing. One is skirt, which is a Viking word that came into England with the Vikings. The other is shirt. This is the Anglo-Saxon word. It's the same thing. Skirt, shirt, it's the same word, two different meanings. Shirt in English means this. Skirt means things that goes down to the floor. Women wear skirts, but at one point, skirt and shirt were the same thing. It was just a big long shirt that went to the floor. It was a skirt. Same thing with ship. You have seen this word, skiff, right? Small boat. And ship. Who is the person who is the captain of the ship? We have an old word in English. The skipper, the shipper. So, my understanding is that the Old Norse skade had the same meaning as the English word for shade. Now, I could be wrong about that. There could have been a change in understanding. Lots of times words change their meaning over time. Maybe there was a change in the Norwegian. I don't know. Maybe it's a completely unrelated word, comes from a completely unrelated root. I don't know about that. Or the other option is I could be completely wrong, and maybe that's the way you see it. The way you're saying it is maybe the way that it is. My personal feeling is, based on the logic, I think that Skade and Shade are the same. And that is her name. Her name is Shade. And who is she? She is the wife of who? Njord. Who is Njord? Njord is Saturn. What does Saturn represent? Saturn represents the darkness of karma as it comes over you, the judge. His wife is the shade, the shadow that comes over you when karma is connected. I think that's what it means. To me, that's what the logical, and I think there's some linguistic evidence for that. I know that I'm not the one who came to that conclusion that Skade meant shade. That came from somewhere else. But it makes sense to me. Having said that, I'm open to be wrong about that. But thank you for the question. Question, why does this always end up at racism BS in this chat? I don't know. I don't know if you're talking about me being full of BS or if somebody else is. But racism is a problem. It's a real issue. Otherwise, people wouldn't, there wouldn't be people having television shows get canceled simply because somebody made a racist tweet. This is obviously an issue. So it comes up because it's a real thing. One of the reasons why I am not afraid to look at it is because, I am somebody who represents my ancestral teaching. My ancestral teaching, my ethnic ancestral teaching is Norse. Those are my ancestors. I did not seek this out. I became what some people call a Norse shaman or Viking shaman or whatever. Those aren't my words, those are other people's words. I became that because I was practicing multiple other traditions and I had reached an end. I thought I was Celtic. I used to have real prejudice against anything Germanic. I thought I personally had I had judgments, and I thought that German people were naturally racist, and I had all kinds of prejudiced things about German people. When I was looking into, I had reached the end of what I was capable of studying in Taoism and in a bunch of other things, and I needed something else. I needed something to fill in the gaps of my knowledge, and I was looking into Siberian shamanism. And one day I write about this in one of my books, I think The Thunder Wizard Path. And I was flipping around the internet and I saw a video of some college kid who just looked normal to me, but apparently he was of Native American descent. And he was picketing a Michael Harner shamanism training seminar. And he was saying that white people were stealing his religion. These were people who were learning Siberian shamanism. But he took it upon himself to say that white people can't do this because they're stealing their religion. And, now there's some truth to that. We have a culture where we've got a lot of white Americans who are appropriating Native American guys and pretending or wanting to practice what they believe to be shamanism, and the only way they know how to do that is to act like what they think a Native American is. So they love Native American this and Native American that, and Native Americans look at them and go, that has nothing to do with us, and the white people have no idea how hurtful that is. In any case, that's the background of that guy. So I get furious because I'm looking into Siberian shamanism, but for whatever reason, this Native American kid is saying that white people are stealing our culture and you shouldn't do this. I got so furious about it, and then I sat with myself and I realized he was right. I realized that, that I too I felt so guilty about my own ethnic heritage that it didn't even dawn on me to look into my own ancestral heritage. And that's one of the things he says. He says, why don't you practice your own ancestral heritage? Why do you have to take ours? Now, again, I think he was way out of line. But what he said was, I think, accurate. And that's when I did research and I did some shamanic journeys, and I found out that I am not Celtic, but I am, in fact, descended from Norse Vikings who invaded Britain. That's why I do that. I honor that. The reason why I talk about race is because there are a lot of people who are practicing my ancestral shamanic practice who use that as an excuse for their political and their racial exclusionism and sometimes outright racism and bigotry. I was looking on here, there are people who call themselves the soldiers of Odin. Do you know anything about them? They're racist fucking thugs. There are people out here who call themselves folkish. And there's all range of folkish, but the word folkish comes from Nazis, Nazi heathens. Our folk. This is why only white people should be worshiping the gods. I am not afraid to confront that bullshit. So racism is going to come up in my Q&As. And I'm no longer going to pander to the racists. If they don't like what I'm saying, they can go somewhere else. But I have no tolerance for that. So at some point it's going to come up, and people are going to find my channel who are somewhere in that middle range, who may have some political or some racialist views, and I'm going to step on their toes. Because if you want to understand how our gods work, you got to get rid of that bullshit. Otherwise, you're going to be, basically just another form of Christianity. That's my take on that. To answer your question, I don't think you asked me that, but oh, you did ask me that. So that's my answer to that question. All right, let me see here. So banned to what? You're this close to getting banned because you're now attacking other people instead of letting people have their whatever. And Cosmo Joe, just don't encourage him. Let's see. All right. I don't see any more questions because you guys are fighting with each other. What does racist really mean? You don't mean that. You know exactly what it means. Stop playing. Stop bullshitting. Come on. NA. Okay, that's not a question either. Nope, you guys are just fighting. Is there a question? I don't see a question. Here we go. Here's a couple. Let's see here. Okay, Skyclad Faye, question. I have to go on to CBD THC treatment soon. How do I protect my energy aura at this time? Well, you can do some Qigong. You can do this practice. If you want to, you can do this while you're doing that. It will help to counter some of the negative effects of THC. CBD's not itself harmful unless you take too much of it. Then it can give you headaches and stuff. But THC will sap your aura. But I also acknowledge that it has some medicinal benefits. Do the Thor's Hammer Qigong. Go onto my channel and do that. And do that while you're doing the other stuff, and it will only help you. And it may counteract some of the side effects of the THC. Skyclad Faye, question. What if your unconscious hates and rebels against ritual, but you need ritual to reprogram it? I think this could be why I'm struggling. I don't know what to tell you. Ritual is discipline. So if you have an unconscious resistance to ritual, it also means you have an unconscious resistance to Saturn, which is discipline and karma. And I don't know all about your, your health challenge. I don't know, so this isn't a blanket statement, but I'm willing to bet that there's a good chance that A lot of it has to do with your resistance to your own karma. So ritual is about reprogramming the unconscious, and the unconscious, when the unconscious is out of whack, that's one of the ways we get physically sick. So ritual will put that together. If you are having an unconscious, karmic issue, ritual will be challenging. You won't like it. But that's a good sign. It's the bitter medicine that's going to reprogram you. What you're resisting is taking a look at the false programming that's in your unconscious. Your unconscious mind tries to protect it. So that's where the resistance comes in. When somebody has a problem with ritual, it means that their unconscious false programming, which thinks it's protecting you, is trying to stop you from that because it knows that the ritual could potentially dismantle and destroy that. So healing is not, the New Age idea of everything is love and light and, just be full of love and you'll be healed. That's not real. The true spiritual progress always entails challenge and being willing to take a look at yourself honestly and die to those things. Listen, the thing about disease is that a lot of people unconsciously are willing to physically die because unconsciously they're trying to protect themselves from the unconscious change that is coming. The transformation that the universe wants to bring feels like death to the unconscious. So it actually physically kill you trying to prevent the real change that's coming. So the whole point of all that is that I'm glad that it's difficult and you should do that thing that is difficult. If ritual is difficult for you, then you should be doing ritual every day. Get used to being uncomfortable. Get comfortable in your discomfort. And that will probably have a very powerful effect on your physical healing. Okay, I hope I answered that question. Rami, question, what if once I had a very good intellect and then abnormal things happened where my intellect started to vanish in a way I can no longer gather things together or even speak in a clear sentence? Well, I don't know what you're asking me. That's not a question. It's really, you're sort of giving me a statement. I don't know what you want from me to say. I don't know why that is. Obviously what's happened is that your unconscious defenses have broken down. So I don't know. It makes me want to ask you if you smoke weed, if you do drugs, if you're on any kind of medication. And if you're not on any kind of prescribed, antipsychotic medication, if you're taking drugs to avoid your feelings, then I would say, stop doing that and start, you're going to probably need help. I mean, if this is an emotional, psychological thing, you're not going to be able to fix yourself. You're going to need help. This is one of the things that, I allow people to contact me with. I'm not a therapist, but I'll do what I can to help. But may need some professional help. Again, I don't know enough about it to know. I don't know what that means or why that happened. Black Earth Productions, question. In context to Odin, could you say that Loki and Thor are the polarity of the expression of Odin's consciousness? Let me see if I understand your question here. BlackEarthProductions.com, Black Earth Productions with a Z.com. Go and check out his website. Also, he has his own YouTube channel. I highly recommend you go check it out. Sethicus Boza. Could you say that Loki and Thor are the polarity of the expression of Odin's consciousness? I can see that. I wouldn't say that exactly. Again, I'm gonna bring up the Dig Chakra, the direction wheel, and look at the planets here. I think their relationship is like it is here. So bear in mind, Jupiter is Thor. And Thor in the myths is the only one that can put Loki in his place. Jupiter is wisdom, is deep wisdom that cannot be put into words. This is why they're all connected. Because the intellect is words. Jupiter is knowledge that goes deeper than words, is beyond words. Odin does straddle that because Odin is the intellect that has broken through all of limiting limitations. But it's still like the highest form of the intellect. I would say that Odin is the union of the intellect and the mind. The highest union of the intellect and the mind. Jupiter is related to those things, but is not those things. And Mercury, I would say, is Brage, is just the ability to communicate and put things into. There isn't. I think we need to bring in more characters than just Odin and Thor. Let me see if I'm going to look at your question again, make sure that I'm representing your question. That Loki and Thunar are the polarity of the expression of Odin's consciousness. Yeah, to me, the way that comes across is two-dimensional. It needs to be multi-dimensional. I think that if there was a polarity, it would be Loki and Odin. That Odin is Loki's. That Loki is Odin's shadow self. That's the way I would see it. And that Thunar, yeah, that's how I would see it. Anyway, it's a deep fucking question, man, and I could, to really do it justice, I have to spend a lot more time thinking about it. But those are my initial superficial response to that very good question. Skyclad Faye, question, last one. All right. Do you think certain people came into your path to help you? And you maybe also become somebody else's lesson as well? I mean, I'm not quite sure why you're asking that question. I mean, of course, the answer is yes to both of those. It makes me wonder why you're asking that. There's some unconscious agenda. There's an unconscious codependent agenda in that question, and I don't know what it is. It really makes me want to sit you down and, kind of tear open your codependence. Why you need other people's approval, needing to fix other people, avoid your own pain. When other people are in pain, it makes you uncomfortable. There's something about that in that question. And I'm not judging you for it. I'm just reflecting back what I see here. Steve Travesty, question. Are any of the gods the same with different names, such as other lightning gods to the Norse? Hi, Steve. You must be new to the channel. So the answer to that question is yes. I talk about that in depth. Again, if people are coming onto my channel, so many people, look, I've got books out there. I don't even know how many books I have. I have something like 400 videos on this channel alone. And if you put the time and effort to go into my channel and search within my channel, you can type in whatever. Type in thunder gods, and you'll find all kinds of stuff. The short answer is yes. I am encouraging you to put the time and effort to learn my channel. Somebody came on my channel today, I think, and left a comment and said, I went looking for the meditations and I couldn't find them. Could you mark them as meditations? And my response was, I already did. And if you learn how to, and I asked, do you know how to search within a channel? And then I asked, do you know how to find playlists within a channel? And I said, because if you don't, learn how to do it. If you do, then it looks like you didn't work that hard to find them, because if you know how to do that, you just type in meditation, and meditation, all the meditation videos will come up. If you know where to find the playlist, you can look and find on the playlist, meditations. So put some time and effort. Go in there, look for the playlist. Go, if you don't, look, the thing is, if you type on top of YouTube, right, that search bar, that's going to give you all of YouTube. That's not my channel. You need to learn how to find within my channel. And it's frustrating to me because, again, we've got this internet culture where people just don't put the time and effort into learning things. So put some time and effort into finding what's on my channel. I'm not trying to attack you personally, but that will answer that question. All right, so there's that. Let me see. Cause, let's see. All right, so... All right, again, please avoid the talking amongst yourselves so that I can find where the questions are. Cosmo Joe question. I think this was the next one. Yeah. Yep, okay, so let's see. Cosmo Joe question. In meditation, if I let the meditation focus deepen too much, I'll get to a point where I am gripped by something and start feeling my energy recoil and paralysis take over. What is this? So, Cosmo Joe, this isn't the first time you've asked me this question. You've asked it at least 2 or 3 times in some form or another. So, I have routinely pointed out to you that I think that you're too far into your intellect. You use your intellect, which again separates you from your emotions. Everybody's different. You have a strong intellect. So trying to know what this is, like wanting to know what this feeling is an understandable question. But again, I don't think it's helpful for you to know what things are. What is helpful for you is to be in that emptiness and just have your feelings. When you get to that place where you feel gripped by something and start feeling your energy recoil, your energy is recoiling because you're afraid. It's not happening by itself. That's happening because you yourself are making the choice in your emotional body to pull your energy back. And until you can get to a place where you can feel all of your feelings, it's going to feel like it's happening to you. So my suggestion is that meditation, is taking you to a place where you get to face your fear of being alone, your fear of dying, your fear of losing your identity. All of these things, it's a death. It's a death. It's a fear of death, and it's something that has to happen. You're on the verge of going to a much deeper spiritual place. So it's a really good thing, but it's really frightening. Even if I knew what it was, even if I could put into words for you what it was, I don't think that's helpful for you. I recommend going back there and just go with it. Just dive into the fear. Get out of your intellect. It's going to be hard for you. You're addicted to your intellect. You're trapped in it. And it's your intellect that is afraid, because once you get beyond that, you're going to a place that the intellect can't go. And you've been relying on it. You've been using it as a shield from your emotions and from your life. And when you're willing to let go of that and have that death and die to it, you'll get to that next place. But it's going to be frightening. So I don't know how else to help you. Just keep doing it. Just keep going there. At some point you'll break through if you are determined enough. And if you're willing to let go of what you think you know, and if you're willing to stay in the feelings. And it may happen in this lifetime, may happen in the next one, but I would say keep doing it. All right, let's see, what else here? Susie Yoten's wife question, do you think Hessonite garnet is a good stone for Loki Rahu? As my understanding, I think Hessonite is the gemstone for Rahu. But you can look that up. You can just look up, Vedic astrology Rahu gemstone. Hessonite is one of them. I think Cat's Eye is Ketu, and Hessonite is Rahu. Let's see here. Looking for the questions again. Debbie T question: are dwarves giants, and are Vanir's descended from Aesir? No to both questions. I want to do, I was thinking about doing a Q&A on the war between the Aesir and the Vanir. I won't get into it. I will say this. First off, dwarves are not giants. Dwarves are powered by human emotions. They are a human thing. Dwarves have a strong connection to human beings. Giants are forces of physics, forces of nature that cannot be assailed even by the gods. Even even Thor loses his battle against the giants. When he tries to go up against time and old age, he loses. And Vanir and Aesir are two types of deities. They're not descended from each other. The Aesir are the celestial gods who represent timeless perfection. They have the mind of children. They live in timeless, perfect, innocent perfection. That's why they're constantly going to battle. That's why that's why people who are right wing like the Aesir, because the Aesir, everything is black and white. There's no middle ground. It's because they're timeless perfection. The Vanir, the reason why people who are liberal like the Vanir are because liberal people tend to function from the right brain, which is not linear, it's not dualist. That's why you get artists and other people who are very, did I do that right? Yeah, very right-brained. The Vanir represent time and experience through time. That's why they're called the elder gods. So you said, are the Vanir descended from the Aesir? That wouldn't make any sense because the Vanir are called the elder gods. So if anybody would have been descended, it would have been the Aesir. But that doesn't work because they're just different forces in the universe. We live in the middle. And we represent the culmination of all these energies, and this is why shamanism is about balance. Balancing all these different forces. And the forces are always changing, which is why we don't hit a static level of spiritual enlightenment. There is just this dynamic balance that we learn to shift with and move with. That is the true spiritual practitioner, what we would today call a shaman. Iowa X, question, if the moon and Mercury are not friendly, why is it that Rahu is the balance to Mercury? I know that the Rahu is... So, again, questions... You're making assumptions in the question that's not accurate. If the moon and Mercury are not friendly, why is it that Rahu is the balance to Mercury? The moon is not Rahu. So why did you start with if the moon and Mercury are not friendly? That's a whole other subject. Why is it that Rahu is the balance to Mercury? I've already explained it. Mercury is the intellect, the limitation of the intellect that wants to categorize things. Rahu is an iconoclast. He wants to break all of the rules. So when people are stuck in the intellect, Rahu, fear, another guy here was talking about he's in fear. Rahu is also fear. When we're stuck in our intellect, the way we overcome that is by breaking all of the limitations. That's why Rahu is used to balance Mercury. Why you asked about the moon, I don't know. Mercury is used to balance the moon when the moon is out of whack, when you're too expansed in the mind that you can't focus, then you need the intellect to bring you back down into how do I practically use that? Tell me what this means and how to use it. Mercury is very practical. Mercury is a businessman. He wants to know how I can make money off of it. So I'm not sure that you were listening to what I was saying, but it is kind of deep stuff. And you have to think multilaterally. It's not an either or. It's a this and that and this and that and this. You look at it as this big giant three-dimensional thing. Okay? All right, so those are all my questions. I'm going to take a break. We might be done, yeah, because we're at about the 2-hour mark, so we might be done for today. But I'll take a break and we'll come back. Okay, so before I don't know if there are any questions, but before I check, I was thinking about it. You're right. Especially, you'll notice when I talk about Odin, the subject of race and racism will come up, and you'll see me get incensed about racism and about the racism in modern heathenism. And I'm going to say this at my own peril to give you an idea that I don't say what I'm about to say lightly. I'm speaking on behalf of Odin when I tell you that connecting his name to racial exclusionism of any kind is absolutely infuriating to him. He hates that. I am clear, Odin has been clear with me, he hates Christianity, hates it. He doesn't hate it because he's a religious bigot. He hates it because Christianity creates slaves, and because Christianity demeans the divine power of human beings to create their own reality. To him, that's what he came, not that he came, that's what he gives to human beings. That's what he teaches them. By his example, he gave enlightenment to himself. He died to himself to himself. And he did that not only for his own awareness, but then he brings that example for everyone else. Christianity destroys that. Christianity stopped in its tracks what Odin was doing to the European race, and then was going to do for the rest of the world. Because every race has its own ethnic lesson that they've gotten from, their ancestral gods. And as much as Odin hates Christianity, he hates racism worse, much worse. And I am telling you, without any anger or any wishing any ill will on anybody, that when you use the symbols of Thor or Odin, or the names of Thor and Odin, to promote any kind of racial bigotry or exclusion or racialism on any level, you are invoking the wrath of the gods. It doesn't mean in a Christian way that you're going to whatever. It means that you will go through a very challenging awakening. If not in this life, in another one. And that every time you do that, you invoke him in that way, you are asking for a very serious fucking awakening. And as I said, it's going to be very challenging. So I can't help it. I got to be honest with you. I wish I could sidestep the whole thing. I wish I didn't have to talk about it. I wish that people would stop coming onto my channel and wanting to talk about it. I wish people would stop trying to point me towards some racist or some racialist trying to get me to connect to their teachings, because they like what I'm teaching, but they just wish that I would get in with the, fall in line and get into the racialist thing. But, yeah, I can speak for Odin when I say that that is absolutely disgusting to him. Anyway, like that or not, that is my belief, that that's how Odin feels about it. Okay, so let's see if there are any questions here. All right. Question. Iowa X question. Could you post that chart? I don't know what chart you're talking about. Do you mean this? Sorry, I kind of screwed things up. Do you mean the dig chakra? It's called a dig chakra. D-I-G and then chakra. It's also called a Kala chakra. K-A-L-A chakra. Go look that up if that's what you're asking. Black Earth Productions question, in context to the Sumerian text. Well, I would have to even know, I mean, I know pretty much absolutely nothing about the Sumerian mythology, so I have no knowledge of that. Somebody asked me this, no, somebody was asking me about Enki and Odin, but again, I know nothing about it, so I don't even want to, crap on that by even talking about it. I know nothing about Sumerian anything, so sorry about that. If I don't know something, I will say I don't know anything. Dharma Child question, what is a good example of a person who exudes a balance with and in the reflected forces of Odin and Loki? What is a good example of a person? Let me see if I can try and answer that. A good example is somebody who, they're two opposing forces of the same thing. They both represent the ideal human. This is coming to me as I'm talking. I was going to try and say something else, but this is what's coming to me right now. The ideal human represents the merging point between Odin and Loki. Odin represents dying, because he died to himself. It represents dying to human limitation and achieving full divine human awareness. We would call that enlightenment. That's probably not going to happen while you're walking around in a meat bag. It's probably going to happen when you achieve, such an awareness that you no longer need to clothe yourself in human flesh and come down here and have all these experiences. So that's, on one hand, that's Odin. On the other hand, you have Loki. Loki is Rahu. So Loki is the highest expression of Rahu. Rahu, now I'm not saying that Loki is Rahu. Understand that. I'm saying Loki represents the highest vibration of Rahu. Rahu represents the unfulfilled desires, ambitions, obsessions that drive you to take on a physical body, because we take on a physical body so we can experience and fulfill our desires. So here you have human beings smack dab in the middle. Again, this just came to me as you asked me this question. So if Odin and Loki are flip sides of the same coin, then we expand that to create, I don't know, a sandwich. And in the middle of the sandwich is the ideal human. So there's no direct answer to that question other than, finding that balance is the whole journey. It's a journey. That's why we're here. Steve Travesty, $5. Thank you, sir. Question. I know I am right-brained. How do I master my trouble with left-brained issues I may have? That was a very left-brained question. So you're saying that you're right-brained, which means that you don't see things in a linear fashion. You don't see things in a dualist fashion, right? Because left hand is the right brain, the left hand is the feminine. If we're on the same page about this, left hand is the artistic, the feminine, the all of that, the moon. The right hand goes to the left brain. The left brain is the logical, the dualist, right? So if you're saying that you are right-brained, which means you don't see things in dualist fashion, then how do you master your left brain? You're kind of the opposite of everybody else, because most people are left-brained and need to get into the right brain. The right brain is the side that says, I relate to you, I connect to you, I feel you, I am you. The right brain says, you're over there, you're that, I'm this. Right? So, I'm wondering if you got those flipped. But if you're saying that you need to get more practical, then one way is to get more into your physical body. I don't know. I'd have to ask you more questions because there's something missing in that question. There's something I'm not hearing in that question. Okay, let's see here. Greg Thunder Wizard Apprentice. Wow, hello. Question. Hello, teacher. Do you know any books on Norse power animals? Do I know any books on them? I don't. That would be a great question. Odin has his horse. Frey has his boar. Freyja has her cat. What else do we got? There's more. That's a good question. I wish I knew that offhand. I don't know of any books offhand, but I'm sure you can look it up. If you research it, I'm sure you can find it. Cosmo Joe question. So the panic attacks are caused by the intellect as the mind expands beyond its grasp. I couldn't have said it better myself. I want to ask you what exists for the mind beyond the intellect, but that is the intellect also, right? No. Yeah, we've had this discussion. You think the intellect is everything. You think that when you die to yourself and you lose your identity, what will be left is the intellect. You're so attached to the intellect. No, the intellect is the first thing that's going to go. Trust me. When you die, one of the first things that's going to die with you is your intellect. The mind is beyond the intellect. The soul and the mind will survive. Your intellect and your brain and your body will die. The intellect is nothing more than a computer program. It is the software that your brain uses to interface your mind and your soul with three-dimensional physical reality. That's all it is. When you go beyond that, you will be in the realm of the mind. This is why your intellect is so afraid of it, because right now your intellect is trying to control your mind. It is controlling your mind. Your mind is trying to expand beyond it. So when you meditate, your mind, you have that right. It starts to expand beyond the limits of the intellect, and the intellect panics. And it pulls your energy back. So, yeah, the mind and the intellect are meant to be subservient to the soul. Interesting that the soul was this finger. This is the ring finger. The reason why we put marriage rings on this ring finger is because this connects to the soul. This finger. If you want to connect to your soul, you can make this mudra. All different ways of doing this mudra. This will connect you to your soul. This is Jupiter, so this is kind of the wisdom part of your mind. This is why this is the default mudra, because Jupiter is wisdom. And if in doubt, go to the deepest part of wisdom to teach you spirituality. This is Saturn. This is why when somebody uses this finger, this one, they are throwing Saturn at you. What they're really saying to you is, may your karma fall on your head. This is your middle finger. This is why we put rings on this finger, because this is connected to the heart, which is where the soul resides. This is the intellect. This is why we make pinky swears. It's your intellect. Anyway. Yeah. Black Earth Productions. Wisdom councils need to come together again as it was before. All races. Oh. Totally agree with that. I think we are heading for that, my friend. I definitely think we are headed for that. See, I'm looking for the questions here again. Yeah, so Black Earth is agreeing with me. It's opposite. So you're saying you're left. What did you say here? You said you were left-brained? No, you said you're right-brained. You're really left-brained. And so the way to overcome your left brain is, as I just got through saying, meditation, qigong, energy work, anything that connects with breath, anything that gets you out of the part of your mind that wants to nail down this means that, and that is this, and this is black, and this is white. You need to go into the space of expansion, where there aren't any, where you become, where you become one with the universe. That is the right brain. So your trouble with your right brain is probably still connected to, Cosmo Joe, to his credit, keeps coming back, even though I keep, hammering him about his intellect. You are probably stuck in your intellect because you are avoiding your emotions. I don't know you, but why is this coming to mind? Do you use any power plants? Do you use any hallucinogens to expand your mind? They won't expand your mind, they trap you in your intellect. Sorry, guys. All of that stuff traps you in your intellect. I would knock all that stuff off. You can do it if you want. If it works for you, do it. But if you want to get out of your limiting brain, stop all that stuff. I'm talking from experience. Let's see. Oh, yeah, okay, all right. Dev ET question, isn't the world suffering because feminine has been suppressed? Wow, a lot of unconscious stuff in that question. Is that the only reason the world is suffering? Is that it? Is that the only reason? The feminine has definitely been suppressed. Oh, no two ways about that. It was a choice. Both males and females made that choice. There are no victims. So the way your question is worded, it makes it sound like there are victims. There are no victims. We did it. We chose to do it. But it also tells me a lot about you. So first off, acknowledge where you feel victimized, because I hear that in that question. How to awaken the feminine in humanity? You can't awaken one without awakening the other. They're yin and yang. When you do, there's the qigong I practice and teach in Celestial Qigong. I don't know, wherever it is. Qigong.thunderwizard.com. When you go there, you can practice Celestial Qigong. There's a practice called the yin-yang hands. That will awaken both the male and the female. Yeah, it makes me want to ask you a lot of questions. There's a lot of unconscious, codependent stuff in that question. And there's probably some victim mentality in there as well. We all have it. I'm not judging you for it. I'm just reflecting back what I see. Wait, actually I meant the intellect is what was asking the question. I don't know what you mean by that. I have to go back to your question. So the panic attacks are caused by the intellect as the mind expands beyond its grasp. What exists for the mind beyond the intellect? But that is the intellect also, right? Yeah, again, the intellect isn't... Did you hear what you just said? Does the intellect survive beyond the intellect? How can you go past the intellect and have the intellect still be there? Boy, for you, the intellect really is God, isn't it? If I heard your question right. Your intellect is not asking the question. Your intellect doesn't want to, asking a question means there's an answer. So I guess that is your intellect. When you go beyond the intellect, there is no question. There is nothing to figure out. It's just being. This is why the mind is connected to the emotions. You can't intellectualize the emotions. You can't figure them out. You can only feel them. We need to get you out of that intellect, man. Well, we don't need to do anything. You can stay there as long as you want. I hope I can get you out of the intellect, because I think you'll be happier. Once you get past that, you'll be a lot happier. I mean, it's going to be scary getting there, but I think you'll be a lot happier. I could be wrong. Rami, question, how can I get in contact with you, please? Makes me want to ask, why do you want to contact me? A lot of people want to email me and get these email back and forth with me, and I don't do that. If somebody wants to have a discussion with me, you can get a session with me, and for that you can go to career.thunderwizard.com. But I charge for my time. I have much better thing, people say, hey man, I just found you on the thing, we should talk sometime. Like, I got nothing better to do but to just get into big intellectual conversations with people all over the net because I said something they like. So I don't know why you're wanting to connect with me. If you want my help, you can get a session from me. If you really need to ask me in order to find out how I can best help you, you can send me, is that right? I think actually that's wrong. That might be one. Shaman is info@thundershamanism.com. But all I want from you is to tell me briefly in a couple of sentences, what is it that you want? Do you want me to counsel you? Do you want a service from me, or did you want to create some kind of like email relationship, which I won't do. I will only work with people on a professional level. So if you want to, you can tell me in a sentence what it is you want, and then I'll tell you what I think the best thing for you is, and then you can decide whether or not you want that service from me or not. Black Earth Productions question: what is the science of Odin and Loki coming into reconciliation and transcendence with one another happen within us, as is meant with our ancestors via the gods? How does, not what is. So how does the science of Odin and Loki coming into reconciliation and transcendence with one another happen within us, as is meant with our ancestors? Man, Black Earth Productions, man, you asked some deep questions. It's going to take me a week to come up with an answer to that. It's not an easy question. How does that happen? This is the essence of what I'm trying to do. Everything I'm teaching, all of the exercises, all of the working, all the Vedic astrology, all of the ritual with the 8 directions, all of the Qigong, all of the meditation, all of the mantra, all of that stuff, all of the analysis and talking about what this word means and how this connects to our ancestors and taking us back to our first ancestors and talking about the meaning of the word man, all that stuff is designed to do exactly what you're asking. The reconciliation of Odin and Loki is being a fully realized human being. This is where we're meant to go. That's a picture I found which represents what I believe to be the ascended masters, the elves, the bodhisattvas. These are beings that have opened up the 3 selves and that have unified the 3 selves, the 3 minds, the conscious, the unconscious, and the subconscious. They are able to project out through their hands and manifest their reality. We would call it magic. But you can see in that photo, that being is projecting the perfected world that they are seeking to manifest, and they're floating around, they're orbiting around the actual world. That is our destiny. Everybody listening to me, you will be one of those. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. You will become an ascended master. And the reconciliation of Odin and Loki is to get one step below this. Meaning that you still have enough karma that keeps you in the physical body, but you have evolved to the point where you are a walking divine being. You are a God in the flesh. You are a God on this planet. And as God with a little g, and I guess that one is a God with a little bigger g. I don't know. But that's where we're headed. And when you get to that place, then where I'm taking people is that, and we haven't got there yet, there's a practice that I'm going to be teaching called the method of holding the three ones, which is exactly what I've just got through talking about. Opening up and uniting the three centers and being able to intend your reality. But there's a lot of, most of us have to do a lot of cleanup work because our lower self has a bunch of garbage in it, and it takes a long time to clean that up. But when we can connect all of these three centers together, and then when we do that, we automatically connect to these people. We automatically connect to the gods. And then we become what people might have called a shaman in ancient times. Somebody who, with their presence, they bring this dynamic balance. They can communicate with the forces of nature, and they can communicate with the gods, and they can give messages to people. This is where we're headed. That's what you're asking me. How do I put that into one sentence? I've spent my whole life trying to get there just to understand it. I've spent the past 10 years teaching it, and I'm not anywhere near done. So I don't know if I answered your question or not. But the first phase of getting somebody to that stage, and I think the most fundamental and profound stage, is being able to intend your reality. Without anything, you just decide what your reality is, and it manifests. I think that's the first step, and that's where I want to go, and I've seen glimpses of that, and I'm teaching you guys how to do that, the best of my ability. And I think that's where happiness and fulfillment lies. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but that's my thought about that. Dharma Child, question, thank you. So what then is a so-called Jivan Mukta as referred to in the Hindu tradition, i.e. someone who is a living mortal who is liberated as a soul? Well, I just answered that question before I even read it, so there you go. Colonial Wolf, question, I have been using runes since I was a child. What causes one to be drawn to them? I don't know. Probably you have a genetic connection to, your ancestors probably were Germanic, and you probably have a genetic connection to it. But I know people who aren't necessarily of any Germanic background who are also connected to it. So I don't have one answer for you. Who cares why? They're available to anybody, so enjoy. Let's see. Nemo Blade. Yes, Nemo, I'm an Illuminati. Right, the Jupiter Mudra, I'm an Illuminati, you caught me. I'm kidding. And I know he is too also. Okay, so Cosmo Joe, yeah, so you got it. Right. Your intellect is trying to remain in control. So, okay, so you got it. Passing Arcturus, my question, is the feminine inherently chaotic? Actually, yes. Don't get upset, women. That's not a gender statement. There's yin and yang. Yang represents strength. Yin represents power. When you have strength, power wants to support it. When there is no strength, power goes crazy. In the relationship, if we're talking about a relationship between men and women, a heterosexual man and woman connection. Generally speaking, don't anybody get their panties in a wad. I'm not talking about anybody particular. Generally speaking, when the man is not clear on who he is, the woman feels unsafe. And that is why men, you've probably experienced this, I know I have. You're talking with a woman, you want to take her out on a date. You ask her out and she says yes. And you say, do you want to go to a movie? And she says yes. You want to be the nice, kind man, and so you say, well, what movie do you want to see? And she says, I don't know, you decide. So she wants you to decide. She wants you to take the lead. So you go, okay, let's go see Die Hard. She says, no, I want to go see lovey-dovey chick flick. And then you say, well, why didn't you just say that in the beginning? She said, because I just wanted you to. That's the dance between the male and the female. So, yeah, the female is naturally chaotic when it is not balanced by the male. Ideally, we want this balance within ourselves, so we don't have to depend upon another person to give us that. Although I have nothing against that. I would love to have that again myself. In fact, I'm actively seeking that out. But ideally, we want that within ourselves. Katie Anderson, if you want to ask a question, it helps if you put questions so I can see that you're asking me a question. Otherwise, I think you're just people talking and then I pass you by. Does your channel name indicate working with Thor power? Yep. It sure does. Again, I'm just looking for the questions again. That's why it's helpful not to talk unless you're asking a question. Okay, Didge Village. Question. Any technique you know of to send a message to someone whom you cannot directly talk to, like other drivers on the highway? You're trying too hard. If you're in line with yourself, you don't need to do that. You don't need to send message. I mean, why would you want to send a message to somebody you can't talk to? I mean, I don't know why you'd want to do that. I don't know if you're anyway. Bottom line is, I think you're trying too hard. I think there's a difference between trying to psychically send a message and being in connection with somebody. You know how like synchronicity happens, and you think about somebody and they call. That's not coming from you going, actually, as I think about it, my mom, who was a Christian, which may be why I have some of the gifts that I had, she said that there was like a little secret in her family, and one of her aunts, which would have been my great aunt, used to practice had some kind of psychic ability that was passed down. Now I'm remembering. My mom said it was passed down. It was passed down in the women in her family. Who knows how far back it went. But they had this ability to psychically send messages. And she was a Christian, and so she would try and turn that off. And she said she was constantly being harassed by her aunt that was sending her messages. And she'd call her up on the phone, and she'd say, why are you doing that? Stop doing that. And my aunt would say, oh, so you haven't given up on the gift. Now, that's all fun and cute. But the point is that it was invasive. So wanting to send somebody a message is invasive, and I don't think you should do that. Just be in connection with yourself and in connection with infinity, and infinity will inform people whatever it is that they need, and you will experience it as synchronicity. Cosmo Joe question, does Balder, the soul, have volition of its own, or only in relation to the mind? No, the soul has its own volition. Is it just an energetic mass the mind is connected to? See, now we're getting beyond the ability for human beings to understand. So it is both of those things. And at some point, my limited human brain is not able to go past that. This is something I have thought long and hard about since my partner passed 8 months ago. Trust me, I have thought long, because that's all I've wanted to do is to connect with her. And I've come to the conclusion that kind of gotten to the place where I'm okay not doing that. I believe I got past her being this person right there. I don't know if you can see her. I got her past being that individual. I've accepted the fact that her brain is dead, and a lot of her personality died with that, and the specifics of the person I was in love with no longer exists. And that there's this ball of energy, which we would call her soul, and that is something I can connect to all the time and send love to all the time, and I will. I mean, I'm of the opinion that I think she has already made the journey to reincarnate. So even if I wanted to send her a message, I don't think I could. But I can still connect with that essence of her soul and send her soul love and wish her well. And I hope she has a wonderful new life wherever and whatever she is. So I don't know if that answered your question or not. Steve Travesty question, what is the inner child? I don't know. I don't know that it is. I don't think it's an inner child. I think that we all are. Our essence is of a like that. We're all children when we get past all of our masks and everything. So I don't know about the inner child. I think that's just who we are. We're all infinite. We're all like Aesir. We're infinite children that live in timelessness. Our soul is our soul doesn't age. It's that's that whole Christian about suffer the little children to come unto me because such will enter the kingdom of heaven. That really, there's some truth to that. Your soul is like that. So you don't have to make it the inner child. You just have to stop bullshitting yourself, because when we get past it, we all have those very innocent, vulnerable, tender, childlike emotions. And I don't think that's the inner child. I just think that's who we are. Okay, so we're coming up on 3 hours. I think we're going to be done here. So I'm going to take one last message break, and then we'll wrap it up. Alrighty, so I think I'll check and see if there are any questions I can answer quickly. Katie Anderson question, does asking the three Norns to be present while we do ritual connect us deeper to the earth? The Norns don't care about you. The Norns are forces of time and space. In fact, the Norns are space-time. So the Norns, you live inside of them. So you can ask, there's nothing wrong with asking, but the Norns are not like the gods. The gods have an emotional, personal connection with human beings and the fate of human beings. And, the Norns don't. So in other words, they are ritual. Ritual, by invoking a ritual, you connect with them, and, all that. So, you can if you want. It really doesn't matter one way or another, in my experience. All right. Didge Village question, what reincarnates, soul or spirit? Soul. I don't know what you mean by spirit. Some people mix those two up, but the soul is what reincarnates. Yes, the word spirit has no real definition. You know, if you go and ask, you go ask any Catholic priest or a fundamentalist Christian priest, you ask them to what's the difference between soul and spirit, you'll never get the same answer twice. They don't have any fucking clue. Spirit, if we go by the definition of the word, spirit means life force energy, because spirit means breath. So to respirate is Latin for to respirit. The Latin word to die, expire, it's not the word for death, but we use it to expire. It means to breathe out. It means you breathe your last breath, to expire. Breathe out. When the life force is gone. So the life force dies. I mean, it goes somewhere else or whatever. Your soul lives on. So the Norns are like a tapestry woven through us. That is a really beautiful way of putting it. I would have to meditate on that. That sounds great. I'll say yes, that sounds like a really wonderful way to describe it. Steve Travesty, I've heard some say soul means breath. Well, then they don't know what the word soul means. They're conflating the word soul with spirit. Saul, S-O-U-L, I'll shut up with this, comes from the ancient word Saul. And Saul meant sun and soul. There's also a rune called Saul. Spirit means breath. That's the definition of the words. That's not up for negotiation. If somebody wants to change the meanings of them, or if there's a different meaning in certain situations, but that's what it means. This is the last question, and then I'm going to take off for the night. Question, but ghost is someone who failed to reincarnate? No. You need to spend more time watching my channel because I talk about that. The ghost has nothing to do with the soul. The ghost is the lower self, and to understand what a ghost is, you have to understand what the lower self is. So watch my videos about the lower self. Okay, last one, Fredo Santana. Question, do you realize how arrogant... I'm just going to block you. So this is what happens when somebody is an asshole and does not have any respect and comes on here and wants to pick a fight. So I'm going to hide user on this channel, which means this guy's never going to be able to say anything ever again. So let's all wave goodbye to Fredo Santana and wish him well. He can come and watch, but he can never communicate again. Bye-bye. There he goes. Okay. Katie Anderson question, which Germanic goddess do you discover after channeling the Hul breath? Her name is Hulda or Hole. There she is. Alrighty, that's it for me. And like Fredo Santana, I'm going to say goodbye, at least for tonight. And maybe I'll see what happens later on this weekend. Maybe we'll talk about the war between the Aesir and the Vanir. That'll be fun. All right, my friends, thank you. Yeah, that's all. Okay. Talk to you guys next time.